Have you ever felt too small to face a giant? What if I told you that sometimes all you need isn't strength, experience, or influence, but just one stone and unshakable faith? This story isn't about a warrior, it's about a boy, a simple shepherd who, in the midst of trained soldiers and an insecure king, chose to rise when everyone else was paralyzed. While skilled men trembled in fear, he walked toward the impossible with nothing but a sling in hand. You're about to discover hidden details behind one of the most breathtaking battles in the Bible. What pushed David to face the feared Goliath? Why didn't anyone else step up? And how did this showdown change not just David's life, but the destiny of an entire nation? This story is more than a lesson in courage. It's a powerful reminder that when you align with the right purpose, what seems like weakness becomes your greatest weapon. And giants fall. Get ready. This battle will shake you. And maybe it'll make you face your own giants in a whole new way. At that time, Israel was at war with the Philistines. Two armies stood face to face, separated by a valley, waiting for someone to make a move. On the Philistine side stood a massive warrior named Goliath. He was terrifying. Over 9 feet tall, wearing heavy armor, and his sword looked like a tree trunk. Every day he mocked and challenged Israel, insulting the army of the living God. Meanwhile, far from the battlefield in Bethlehem, there lived a young man named David. He wasn't a soldier, didn't carry weapons. He was a shepherd. Simple, skinny, smelling like sheep. Invisible to the war, but not to God. While others looked for a hero based on strength and appearance, God was raising someone unexpected, a heart willing to obey, even without understanding everything. It all started with a simple request from his father. Jesse asked David to take food to his brothers who were at the front lines. It was just a routine errand, but God loves using small moments to trigger massive turning points. What seemed like a basic delivery would become the beginning of a battle remembered for generations. That's how purpose works. When you're aligned with it, even an ordinary walk can become the stage for a miracle. David could have said no. He could have stayed in the field with his sheep. But he went. And sometimes, the biggest battles in life begin with a decision to obey in the small. If David had stayed behind, his name might have never been known. But he made himself available, and that changed everything. How many breakthroughs do we miss because we think they're too small to matter? His arrival at the camp was almost comedic. A teenager surrounded by seasoned soldiers. But in that atmosphere of fear, God planted a seed of faith. The courage that changes destinies doesn't shout. It walks in calmly, with conviction. And that's exactly when the unexpected started becoming inevitable. But what David saw next would flip the whole story. Goliath wasn't just strong, he was bold. For 40 days, twice a day, he stepped forward and shouted, "Choose a man to fight me!" It was a daily taunt, soaked in arrogance and contempt. But no one dared to face him, not the most experienced, not the bravest. Fear froze their legs, sealed their mouths, and faith had all but disappeared from the Israelite camp. When David heard Goliath's words, something inside him ignited. It wasn't rage, it was righteous indignation. This wasn't just a man's war. This was a direct attack on the honor of God. David couldn't believe no one had stepped up yet. Where were the warriors of faith? Where was the trust in God's covenant? While others saw the giant's size, David saw the size of the promise. Right then and there, David volunteered. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" he asked. No one had an answer. His faith sounded insane. He was just a boy. No armor, no sword, no military background. But he had something no one else showed. Absolute trust in God's deliverance. And that changes everything. David's brothers snapped at him. They accused him of arrogance, curiosity, of showing up just to watch the battle. But little did they know, he hadn't come to watch. He came to win. Sometimes, the ones who doubt you most are the ones closest to you. But their opinion doesn't define you. When you're living with purpose, criticism doesn't stop you. David didn't waste time arguing. He focused on the mission. The whole atmosphere was saturated with fear. Cowardice was contagious. But one voice of faith is enough to break a cycle of paralysis. David stood alone, yet unshaken. It's in these exact conditions that miracles erupt, when everything around you screams, "No way!" and heaven whispers, "Go anyway." And David knew this wasn't about him. It was about something much bigger. David's boldness reached King Saul. Curious, the king summoned this confident young man. When he saw David, Saul couldn't hide his surprise. "You can't fight him. You're just a boy," he said. But David didn't back down. Calmly, he shared his testimony, how he had fought off lions and bears to protect his sheep. And in each of those moments, it was God who gave him victory. That changed everything. Because this wasn't about muscle, it was about mission. David wasn't chasing glory. He saw this fight as a chance to reveal God's faithfulness. Saul gave in and offered his armor. But when David put it on, it didn't fit. It was heavy and unfamiliar. He realized something important. He didn't need to look like everyone else to win. He just needed to be who God created him to be. What worked for Saul didn't work for David. That's a life lesson. Don't fight your battles with someone else's weapons. What's a blessing for one might be a burden for another. So David stripped off the armor and picked up his sling. Then he chose 5 smooth stones from a stream. That was enough. God doesn't need special effects, just obedience. And when you trust, the simple becomes supernatural. David was ready, even if the army still doubted. It was like everyone was waiting for him to fail so they could say, "I told you so." But real faith doesn't need applause. It moves even in silence. David didn't try to guarantee success. He trusted. And when you really trust, fear loses its grip. Peace shows up, even in the middle of the battlefield. That's how David walked. As the sun lowered over the valley, David approached the giant, a teenager with a sling and 5 stones. From a human point of view, it was suicide. But from heaven's perspective, it was the beginning of a divine setup. Every step David took was fueled by faith. And where there's faith, there's favor. But what happened next, no one was ready for. As David walked into the valley, Goliath looked at him with contempt. He mocked the boy, seeing him as nothing but a joke. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" "Gee, I mean it," he shouted, offended by the sight. But David didn't flinch. His heart didn't shake, because his trust wasn't in weapons. It was rooted in the God who had always come through for him. David looked Goliath in the eye and declared, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." That wasn't a catchy phrase. It was conviction. While Israel's army hid behind rocks, David stood tall in the name of a promise, because people who live by faith don't act on impulse. They act on divine direction. And David's direction came straight from heaven. Goliath advanced, and David ran toward him. Yes, ran. He didn't wait for the impact. Faith isn't passive. It moves. David swung his sling and launched 1 stone. Just 1. It hit the giant's forehead with precision. Goliath collapsed with a thud that must have shaken the ground. The impossible had just happened, right in front of hundreds of doubting eyes. David didn't stop there. He rushed forward, grabbed Goliath's own sword, and finished the job. That moment symbolized something powerful. He didn't just win. He removed the threat. Sometimes it's not enough to defeat a problem. You need to cut it off at the root. David did it with authority. When God delivers victory, it's complete. No leftovers, no what-ifs. The Israelite army erupted in cheers. The ones who were hiding suddenly became brave. Because one person's victory and faith inspires many. The Philistines fled in panic. Fear had changed sides. And everyone that day learned something crucial. God doesn't need numbers or armor. He just needs someone willing to say, "Here I am." And now, a brand new chapter was beginning in David's life. David's victory didn't stay on the battlefield. It echoed throughout the nation. People started talking, singing, and celebrating the boy who took down a giant. Saul was impressed, but also began to feel threatened. Who was this kid gaining more influence than the king himself? Even after a glorious win, David would face a different kind of trial. Because here's the truth: the bigger your purpose, the bigger the battles that follow. Even with all the attention, David stayed humble. He kept serving. He honored Saul. That's rare. Winning an external war is one thing. Guarding your heart afterward, that's another level. And David did both. He understood that real greatness isn't found in applause. It's found in obedience. Killing Goliath was just the opening scene. A long journey was ahead. Deserts, betrayal, jealousy, running for his life. But David never forgot who he was. He never dropped his faith. That stone in the valley was proof that God finishes what he starts. And if he started something in you, he will finish it too. The question is, will you keep trusting when the scene changes? The impact of that moment was eternal. We still talk about it today, because this isn't just an old Bible story. It's a mirror. Everyone has a giant to face, a fear, a struggle, a challenge that feels too big. David's story reminds us, no giant is bigger than someone living with purpose. You may feel small right now, but God loves to use the small to bring down the mighty. David didn't win because he was special. He won because he believed. And if you believe, you can win too. His story is a bold invitation to stop running and start walking forward. Giants fall when you choose to trust. And maybe your next step of faith is a lot closer than you think. The story of David and Goliath is more than a Bible tale. It's a mirror. Because sooner or later, every one of us will face a giant, a fear that paralyzes, a past that haunts, a challenge that seems impossible. The question is, will you run or will you stand? David didn't win because he had strength. He won because he trusted the one who called him. And that same trust is available to you. Maybe your stone is a simple prayer, a bold decision, or a step you've been afraid to take. That thing holding you back? It's not bigger than the God who can lift you up. Have you faced something like this? What giants have you battled in your life? Drop a comment. I want to hear your story, and if this message spoke to you, don't leave without hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. We've got more powerful Bible stories coming your way. Oh, and there's another amazing video popping up on the screen right now. Click it and keep going. Because when we dive deep into the Bible, we don't just understand the past. We start to understand ourselves. See you in the next one. God bless.